Trust. It's the foundation of every meaningful relationship. It binds families, strengthens love, and creates a sense of security. But what happens when trust is broken by the very people you hold dearest? What happens when the pillars of your life collapse in a single, gut-wrenching moment? For Jasmine, an 18-year-old wife and mother, her world was a balancing act. Young, hopeful, and determined to make her marriage work, she faced the challenges of early parenthood and a relationship many judged harshly. But amidst the struggles, she clung to the belief that love would prevail, that the man she chose, Jason, would stand by her side. "Love anchors her universe. Until we separate," Akers replied. "I'll live with you forever, forever," she told him. Jason, her husband, was 25 when they married, a man she believed was her protector, her partner, her family. Together they faced financial strain, the judgment of others, and the hardships of raising a child while barely scraping by. It wasn't easy, but they had each other. And then there was Cynthia, Jasmine's mother, a widow who had always been Jasmine's rock, her confidant, and her guide through the uncertainties of life. When Jasmine and Jason found themselves struggling, it was Cynthia who welcomed them into her home, offering them a safe haven to start anew. For Jasmine, it felt like a lifeline, one she could never have anticipated would be laced with betrayal. What Jasmine didn't realize was that the safety she thought she'd found was an illusion. Beneath the surface, cracks had already formed. Cracks that would soon shatter her entire world in ways she could never have imagined. Jasmine was just 13 years old when she first met Jason, a young girl full of dreams, laughter, and the kind of wide-eyed optimism that only comes with youth. Jason, on the other hand, was 7 years older, a 20-year-old man who carried himself with a quiet confidence that she found captivating. Their connection, though questioned by many, grew quickly. Jason became Jasmine's everything, her confidant, her protector, her first love. To her, the age gap didn't matter. To her, it was love. But to the people around them, it was a relationship that raised eyebrows and whispers. At just 15 years old, Jasmine became pregnant with their first child. The news shocked her small community and placed a heavy burden on the young couple. For Jasmine, her world turned upside down. While her friends worried about exams and prom dresses, she was preparing for motherhood. Jason stepped up, or at least that's what Jasmine believed. By the time she turned 18, they were married. A modest ceremony, attended by only a few friends and family members, marked the beginning of what she thought would be a lifelong partnership. But behind the smiles and vows, their life together was far from easy. Financial struggles plagued their marriage from the start. Jason worked long hours in a series of odd jobs, but it was never enough. Eviction notices and unpaid bills became a constant reminder of how fragile their situation was. For Jasmine, raising their child in such instability only added to her stress. But through it all, she believed in Jason. She believed that, together, they could make it. It was during one of their most desperate times that Jasmine turned to her mother, Cynthia, for help. A widow who had lost her husband years earlier, Cynthia lived alone in the house where Jasmine had grown up. Lonely but generous, she opened her doors to the struggling family without hesitation. Cynthia was a loving mother, always there for Jasmine when she needed her. But grief from losing her husband still lingered in quiet moments. To Jasmine, her mother's kindness was a blessing. To Jason, it was an opportunity to ease the pressure at home. And so, the young family moved into Cynthia's house, believing it was a fresh start. But even in Cynthia's home, the cracks in Jason and Jasmine's marriage began to show. Jason became distant, often distracted by his phone or lost in thought. Arguments about money turned into arguments about trust. Jasmine, though young, was perceptive. She noticed the subtle changes. The late-night messages, the late-night bus trips. She suspected infidelity, but feared what bringing it up would mean. Jason's temper, though never physical, was something she avoided provoking. His anger could fill a room like thunderclouds before a storm, leaving Jasmine feeling small and uncertain. "Interrupt me!" Jasmine confided her fears to a close friend who urged her to confront Jason. But Jasmine, just 18 and already carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, couldn't find the strength. She told herself she was overthinking that. Jason wouldn't betray her, not after everything they had been through. Meanwhile, Cynthia grew closer to Jason. She saw him as a hard-working young man trying to support her daughter. She believed she was helping ease the strain in their lives. But what seemed like innocent interactions would soon reveal something far more devastating. And so the stage was set for a betrayal that would shatter not just a marriage, but the fragile bonds of a family already on the edge. Thank you for being part of this journey. If Jasmine's story moved you, let us know by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share stories that matter. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an update. And as always, your voice matters, so share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. It was a night like any other. Jasmine, now 18 and heavily pregnant with her second child, had gone out for a rare evening with friends. A chance to escape the stress of her home life, even for a few hours. The rain started as she drove home earlier than usual, feeling a pang of guilt for leaving Jason and her young son behind. It was just past midnight when Jasmine arrived home. The house was dark, except for a faint glow from a room down the hallway. At first, she thought nothing of it. Jason often stayed up late scrolling on his phone or watching television. But as she stepped inside, something felt off. The house was unusually silent, save for a sound she couldn't quite place. Muffled, distant, but unmistakably strange. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked through the hallway, calling out for Jason. No response. The guest room where they stayed was empty, the bed untouched. Her pulse quickened as a creeping sense of unease began to settle in. Strange news, she thought. Her heart raced as the sound grew clearer. It wasn't the television. It wasn't Jason talking on the phone. It was coming from her mother's room. At first, Jasmine tried to rationalize what she was hearing. Maybe her mother had left the TV on. Maybe Jason was helping Cynthia with something. But as she stood there, frozen, the noises became more distinct sounds of intimacy that sent a chill down her spine. And then she saw it. Jason and Cynthia tangled in the sheets of her mother's bed. The scene was like a nightmare come to life. A betrayal so profound, it left Jasmine standing in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what she was witnessing. The room erupted into chaos. Jason, wide-eyed and stammering, tried to justify the unjustifiable. Cynthia, clutching a blanket around herself, began to cry, repeating the same words over and over. "I was lonely. I didn't mean for this to happen." But their excuses fell on deaf ears. For Jasmine, time seemed to stop. The weight of the betrayal hit her all at once, suffocating and unrelenting. This wasn't just her husband. This wasn't just an affair. This was her mother, the woman who had raised her, protected her, and promised to always be by her side. In that moment, Jasmine felt her entire life unravel. The family she had worked so hard to build, the trust she had placed in Jason and Cynthia, it was all gone. Every memory, every promise, every shared moment was tainted by the betrayal she could never have imagined. Jason, in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, followed Jasmine into the living room. But his words only fueled her anger. Cynthia remained in the bedroom, too ashamed to face her daughter. The damage was done, and there was no taking it back. Jasmine didn't stay to hear their excuses. She couldn't. All she knew was that the two people she had trusted most had shattered her world beyond repair. And as she left the house that night, the only thing she could think about was how to protect her child from the wreckage. Jasmine left the house that night without looking back. She didn't pack a bag, didn't pause to process the weight of what she had just witnessed. Her only instinct was to get away. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, heartbreak, but no answers. She couldn't understand how the two people she trusted most could betray her in such a devastating way. For days, Jasmine avoided any contact with Jason or Cynthia. She refused to answer their calls, letting the phone ring endlessly. Every text that came through remained unread, each one a painful reminder of the betrayal that had destroyed her family. She needed space, but space brought no solace. Jasmine turned to a close friend, someone who had been by her side through the ups and downs of her life. Sitting on a couch, she recounted the events through sobs, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I walked in on them," she said, the words sounding surreal even as they left her mouth. Her friend listened in stunned silence, unable to offer anything beyond the comfort of an embrace and a few words of support. Jason, meanwhile, was relentless in his attempts to reach Jasmine. His texts were a mix of apologies and explanations, none of which she cared to read. He claimed he never meant to hurt her, that it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But to Jasmine, the betrayal was beyond forgiveness. It wasn't a moment, it was a choice, and one he had made repeatedly behind her back. Jason, meanwhile, was repeatedly behind her back. Cynthia, too, reached out to Jasmine, leaving tearful voicemails that went unanswered. "Sorry, Jasmine." Her mother's voice would crack. "Please let me explain." But what was there to explain? Loneliness? Weakness? Whatever the reason, Jasmine couldn't bring herself to listen to it. Days turned into a week, and just as Jasmine began to think she could keep Jason and Cynthia at a distance, a knock came at the door. Her heart sank, already knowing who it would be. It was Jason, standing outside in the rain, begging her to let him in. She wanted to tell him to leave, but something in his tone, desperation, perhaps compelled her to give him one chance to speak. Jason's face was pale, his hands trembling as he sat down and tried to gather the words. He apologized again, stumbling over his sentences as Jasmine stared at him, unmoved. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice steady but cold. And then Jason dropped the second bombshell that shattered what little was left of Jasmine's world. Cynthia was pregnant, her mother carrying Jason's child. For a moment, Jasmine thought she hadn't heard him correctly. She blinked, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind refusing to process the words. "What?" she asked, her voice rising, but Jason repeated it, and this time the words hit like a punch to the stomach. Jasmine's face twisted in anger and disbelief. "Get out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But when Jason didn't move, she screamed it. "Get out!" Jason left, but the damage was done. Jasmine was left alone, sitting in the silence of her own thoughts, the weight of his confession pressing down on her. How could this have happened? How could her mother, a woman she had trusted with everything, betray her so completely? And now, this child. A child who would forever be a living reminder of the betrayal. The days that followed were filled with attempts at contact from both Jason and Cynthia, but Jasmine refused to engage. Her mother called endlessly, leaving messages filled with apologies and desperate pleas to meet. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Cynthia said in one voicemail, her voice breaking. "I was lonely, Jasmine. I'm so sorry." But loneliness wasn't an excuse Jasmine could accept. Jason's attempts were just as persistent. He sent long messages promising to change, to fix things, to somehow make amends. But Jasmine couldn't even fathom what fixing this would look like. Every time his name appeared on her phone, she felt a surge of anger and nausea. She had loved him, trusted him, built a family with him, and now she couldn't even stand to hear his voice. The fallout of that night didn't just destroy Jasmine's marriage, it tore apart her family. What had once been a bond of trust and love between mother and daughter was now irreparably broken. Cynthia, once her confidant and supporter, was now the source of her greatest pain. Jason, the man she had vowed to spend her life with, was now a stranger. She could never forgive who she had trusted with her life for 20 years. For Jasmine, moving forward seemed impossible. Every step felt heavy, every breath a reminder of the betrayal. But deep down she knew she had to keep going for her child, for the baby she was carrying, and for herself. She had to find a way to rebuild her life, even as the pieces lay shattered around her. In the weeks following that fateful night, Jasmine found herself navigating a storm of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Her world, once fragile but intact, now felt irreparably broken. Each morning, as she woke to her son's cries or the movements of the baby growing inside her, she was reminded of the responsibilities she couldn't escape, even as her heart remained heavy with betrayal. The weight of it all began to take a toll on Jasmine's mental health. Simple tasks like preparing meals or tidying up felt monumental. She often found herself sitting in silence, staring at nothing, her mind replaying the events of that night over and over again. The betrayal wasn't just an act, it was a scar, etched deep into her soul, and no amount of time seemed capable of healing it. Jasmine's role as a mother became both her salvation and her greatest challenge. She poured every ounce of her energy into caring for her child, determined to shield him from the chaos that had engulfed their lives. She would sit with him for hours, reading stories, singing lullabies, and pretending that everything was normal. But even in those quiet moments, she couldn't shake the thought that her children deserved more. More stability, more love, more of a family than she could offer in the shadow of what had happened. Pregnancy, already physically demanding, became even more difficult as Jasmine struggled with the emotional toll of her situation. The stress left her exhausted, her body and mind constantly at odds. Doctors warned her about the risks of stress on her pregnancy, but how could she find peace in a world that had been turned upside down? Stress. As the days turned into weeks, the ripple effects of the betrayal extended beyond Jasmine's immediate family. Friends and neighbors, once supportive and close, began to pull away. The story, once private, became a whispered topic of conversation throughout the community. People speculated, judged, and pointed fingers, each adding their own narrative to the events they didn't fully understand. For Jasmine, the weight of public scrutiny only added to her sense of isolation. Cynthia's attempts to justify her actions continued, though her words brought little comfort to anyone. She spoke of loneliness, of grief over her husband's death, of seeing Jason as someone who understood her in a way no one else had. But for Jasmine, these explanations felt hollow, like excuses crafted to absolve herself of responsibility. How could a mother do this to her daughter? How could she cross a line so deeply entrenched in trust and love? Their relationship, once strong, was now unrecognizable. Cynthia's calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. Every attempt to reach out only deepened the chasm between them. As Jasmine struggled to reconcile the mother she had loved with the woman who had betrayed her so deeply, Jason, too, faced the consequences of his actions. Once a figure of respect in their small circle, he was now viewed with suspicion and contempt. His efforts to reconcile with Jasmine were met with silence, his words falling on deaf ears. He claimed to love her, to regret his actions, but how could Jasmine believe him? How could she trust a man who had shattered their family in the most unimaginable way? The child Cynthia was carrying only complicated matters further. It wasn't just a symbol of betrayal, it was a living, breathing reminder of the pain that would forever bind Jason and Cynthia in ways Jasmine couldn't escape. The thought of this child, her sibling, and her children's half-sibling, was a constant source of confusion and heartache. Jasmine's story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the fragility of trust within families. Betrayal, especially from those closest to us, doesn't just break hearts, it shatters identities, relationships, and futures. For Jasmine, trust was no longer a given. It was something that had to be earned, something she might never fully give again. Her story resonated with others who had faced betrayal in their own lives. It sparked conversations about boundaries, forgiveness, and the complexities of family dynamics. How do we heal from wounds inflicted by those we love? How do we move forward when the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us? Jasmine's journey wasn't just about survival. It was about finding strength in the face of unimaginable pain. It was about learning to prioritize herself and her children, even as the world around her felt hostile and unkind. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Jasmine's story, though heartbreaking, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Betrayal has a way of changing us, of forcing us to see the world in a different light. For Jasmine, it was a lesson learned at a cost no one should ever have to pay. But even in the darkest moments, she found a reason to keep going. Her children, her future, her hope for a life beyond the wreckage of her past. For Jasmine, the path forward wasn't easy, but it was necessary. After weeks of turmoil, she made a decision she would no longer let the actions of others dictate her life. She wasn't just a victim of betrayal, she was a mother, a protector, and above all, a survivor. Slowly but surely, she began to pick up the pieces, focusing on what mattered most, her children. Her first step was finding stability, both emotionally and physically. With the help of friends and support groups, Jasmine sought refuge in a small apartment where she could begin anew. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a space free of the memories that haunted her. Jasmine immersed herself in motherhood, finding strength in the laughter of her son and the hope of the babies she carried. She knew her children needed her to be strong, and in them she found the will to keep moving forward. Each milestone, each smile, reminded her of her purpose. Healing, however, was a longer journey. The scars left by Jason and Cynthia didn't fade overnight. Jasmine sought therapy to confront the anger and pain that threatened to consume her. She learned to set boundaries, to protect her emotional well-being, and to trust again, though cautiously. Over time, she began to rebuild her confidence. She rediscovered parts of herself that had been lost in the chaos of her young marriage. Slowly, she found joy in small moments, a walk in the park, a quiet evening with her children, a phone call from a friend. These moments, though fleeting at first, grew into a foundation of resilience. The betrayal also changed Jasmine's perspective on relationships and trust. She no longer gave her trust freely, it had to be earned. And while forgiveness felt impossible at first, Jasmine came to realize that forgiveness wasn't for Jason or Cynthia, it was for herself. Letting go of the anger wasn't about absolving them, it was about freeing herself from their control. Cynthia and Jason remained a part of Jasmine's life, though in limited capacities. Jason's involvement was restricted to co-parenting their child, and even that came with strict boundaries. Cynthia's relationship with Jasmine was strained, reduced to occasional conversations focused on practical matters. The bond they once shared was gone, replaced by a cautious distance that protected Jasmine's hard-earned peace. Jasmine's story is more than just one of betrayal. It's a testament to resilience. She faced unimaginable pain, but refused to let it define her. Instead, she chose to rebuild, to create a life that prioritized her happiness and the well-being of her children. She learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means growing stronger in the face of adversity. And while her journey is far from over, Jasmine's strength offers hope to others who have faced similar challenges. Her story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we can find the courage to move forward. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's shoes? Can trust ever truly be rebuilt after such a betrayal? Or are some bonds meant to remain broken? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your perspective could help someone else who might be facing a similar struggle. Jasmine's story is a reminder that betrayal doesn't have to define you. Even in the darkest times, there's hope for healing and moving forward. It's a lesson in resilience, in finding strength where you thought none remained, and in creating a future that prioritizes your peace and happiness. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you gripping true crime stories that reveal the complexities of human relationships and the strength it takes to overcome life's greatest challenges. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, stay safe and take care.